Welcome everybody. Firstly, I'd like to thank Natalie and Jay for inviting me to speak today. I've got some very fond memories of the Sled Dog Trade Fair, so I'm really sorry that we can't be there in person. When we lived on the East Coast, it used to be the highlight of the highlight of our winter was actually coming to the trade fair. And I remember, it was the first time I saw people like Karen Ramstead and Hugh Neff and Blake Frecking talk. So it was a real honour for me to be invited to speak today. I should probably also offer up a bit of an apology to Natalie and Jay. It's been a technically challenging week, and I've been on their case this week as we've been trying to get the presentation sorted out. So with that in mind, I'd also like to offer up a huge thanks to Viktor, who stepped in at 5 o'clock this morning and agreed that we could use his Zoom account. As I said, we've had a lot of problems trying to get the presentation recorded and loaded up. I've learned more about PowerPoint and YouTube live streaming this week than I really wanted to. And I got up at 5 o'clock this morning to find that only 4% of the presentation is actually loaded up onto YouTube. So that's when I asked Viktor if we'd be able to use his account, and so here we are. The presentation lasts about an hour and a half. I tried recording it twice last night, so I know exactly how long it's going to last. There's a number of ways we can do questions. You can see that in Zoom itself, there's a chat function. There's a chat function, and so you've got that option to type questions into there if you wish, and Viktor will keep an eye on those questions. You can interrupt me at any time throughout the presentation, or at the end. I'm not sure how. It depends on how much time you've got. As I said, the presentation is going to take about an hour and a half, but I'm more than willing to stay around afterwards and answer any questions you may have. I probably should offer up another quick apology. When we did the original presentation, there were a lot of videos embedded in it. We did a trial run about half an hour ago, and the videos just weren't streaming correctly. So we've taken all the videos out of the presentation. Hopefully, it doesn't detract from the overall content of the presentation itself. So we're going to talk about the title I put up is caring for working sled dogs. And it's the three things that I think are the most important aspects when it comes to getting to the start line of any race. Not necessarily the finish line, but getting to the start line. And that doesn't necessarily mean the Yukon Quest or the Iditarod. That can be a mid-distance race. It can be a sprint race as well. And what I'm going to give in this presentation is my opinions. It's not sacrosanct. It's not necessarily the way to go. It's just the way that we do things here, and it's worked for us. So take or leave what you want from the presentation. We're always learning. We're always changing. We're always evolving our program here. So even some of the things that I talk about here, we've actually, we've started to change this year as well. And if I remember, I'll try and describe some of those changes. So as I said, I'm Rob Cooke. I'm from Shaitan Siberian Huskies, and with my wife Louise, we run a mid-long distance kennel based in the Yukon, just outside Whitehorse in the Canadian North. And we focus predominantly on mid and long distance racing. We have 56 Siberian Huskies in the kennel. And our normal goal on a normal year is to run the Yukon Quest. We finished the Quest now on 7 separate occasions. The Iditarod is, in my opinion, the lesser race. So we do that when we feel like something different to do. We've done that. I've done that 3 times and finished it twice. In 2015 and 2016, we did back-to-back Quest and Iditarods, and to date, we're the only Siberian Husky kennel that's actually finished both 1,000-mile races in the same winter. And I'll touch on that a bit later in the presentation. It's not something I'm ever planning on doing again. So we started out in around 1997 in the UK. We got our first Siberian Huskies, and we really got them for company. Louise wanted to do some dog showing, and we decided that we would actually start working them so that we could prepare the dogs for dog showing. And I got really hooked on the working side of things, and so we started racing. And we started. I think our first race was 98, 99. And we did mostly 2 and 3 dogs, but we also did some 4 dog racing and some 6 dog racing as well. And from 99 through until when we left the UK to come to Canada in 2005, we did a considerable amount of racing. We were probably racing 6, 7, 8 times every winter. And like I said, it was dry land sprints, so distances were 3 to 5 miles. The main race that we focused on is the one actually in the bottom left-hand corner, which is the Aviemore race. It still goes on today. It's put on by the Siberian Husky Club of Great Britain. It's a purebred race. And when we were racing, like I said, in the late 90s, early 2000s, you would typically get 200 to 250 teams actually taking part, and all purebred teams, mainly Siberian Huskies, but you'd also get Malamutes and Eskimo dogs and Samoyeds as well. So that was the race that we focused on. And from 98 through until 2005, we slowly improved. Each year our performances were getting better. Our final year, we were consistently in the top 3. We were winning some races and consistently in the top 3. And our red dog, if you look on the picture on the right hand side, the red dog in lead, he was the Siberian Husky Club of Great Britain dual champion in our final year. And I think that our performances improved because we were, as I said before, we were constantly learning and constantly changing, and trying to improve our training program. In 2005, we came to Canada. I was in the military at the time, and I managed to get an exchange position with the Canadian Air Force. But we actually came with the intention of running the Yukon Quest. So even though we were coming on a 3-year exchange, I had very little intention of actually going back to the UK. In fact, we sold everything in the UK when we came across. It was going to be really difficult for us to go back. And we lived mostly on the East Coast. So we lived in Nova Scotia and then in northern New Brunswick. And we started, this was the first time we ever ran dogs on sleds. And so we started trying to get experience actually training and racing on sleds. And you may recognize some of these races here. The top left-hand corner was Sandwich Notch. Bottom left-hand corner was the Greenville. The bottom right-hand corner was the Eagle Lake 100. I learned more at that race than I think I've ever learned in my life. It was a complete and utter nightmare. I'm surprised I'm still actually running dogs after that, but it was a fun race and a tough race as well. The one above is the Tarkamemnon. We did that a couple of times. Ventured towards Central America a couple of times, Central US a couple of times to race. And again, the main focus of our winters though tended to be the Can-Am Crown. I think we took part in the Can-Am between 2006 and 2011. We took part in that 5 times, I think. So we did the 60 twice, and we did the 30 twice, and we did the 250 once. And what we found, again, as we found in the UK, that every year our performances were getting better and better as we learned more about nutrition and more about training. And I actually had a really I don't know, it's not an epiphany. I got some of the best advice from another musher. I was trying to think of his name yesterday. He's an Alaskan musher from Quebec, and I just can't remember his name. I used to race against him every winter. And we did one race, and our performance just wasn't great, and the dogs just weren't looking that good. And I was talking to him. His dogs looked absolutely amazing. They were so well conditioned and so muscled. And I said, I just can't, why can I not get my own dogs into this particular condition? He said, well, are you feeding meat? And I said, well, no, we can't get it. We're only feeding kibble. And he said, well, that's going to be your problem. If you haven't got meat in the diet, you're not going to get condition on the dogs. And we came back, we managed to start a source meat from then on. And we came back to the Can-Am the following year, and both he and I were running in the 60. And like I said, he had a fast team of Alaskans, and he didn't actually pass me until we were coming back into Fort Kent. So probably about 55 miles into the race. And he came up to me afterwards and said, holy shit, what happened? Your team has changed. And I pointed to them and said, look at the condition that they're in. And we, just feeding meat had made such a huge amount of difference to the overall performance of the dogs. So that was a big learning curve for me. And, like I said, every year we learn more and more about training and nutrition. And so we adapt training, and we adapt how we actually feed the dogs. And it was when I was racing on the East Coast, I think it was probably the Odyssey race. I met Denis Tremblay for the first time, and Norman Cassavant. And again, I was talking to Denis, to Julie Albert, Denis' partner. I was talking about some of the difficulties I was having with endurance for the dogs, and she described to me the training program that Denis went through, and his exact training program, and we took that away, and we adapted that. And even today, we're still following the same principles that that Denis and Julie told us back in probably 2008. And I'll describe some of that here. So, like I said, it's a constant learning curve. We change and adapt every year, and hopefully there may be some bits and pieces in this presentation that you can take away as well. So 2011, we decided that the time had come to try and prepare for the Yukon Quest. So I was really lucky. Lev Schwartz had just moved from Massachusetts up to Willow, and he gave me the opportunity to go and stay with him and train in Willow. And so I decided to go up there and actually do my qualifying races for the Quest. So I stayed with him for 6 months. We did a variety of races: the Sheep Mountain 150, the Jinjin 200, the Yukon Quest 300, and then that was the same year that we did the Can-Am 250 as well. It was again a really interesting year. I learned so much about training and about actually running dogs on sleds and preparing for mid-distance racing. But we did actually manage to qualify that winter. We finished the Yukon Quest 300 and the Can-Am 250. And I drove back to the East Coast, and then the following winter decided that we'd actually go and run the Quest that year. So I moved back up to the Yukon in 2012, and Louise joined me at Christmas, and we ran the 2013 Yukon Quest. Again, since 2011, our performances have slowly improved every year. It may be sometimes difficult to tell that when you look at our results from the Quest. We're predominantly at towards the back of the pack, but I think that we're improving every year. The Copper Basin 300, which is this photograph's taken from the CV300. We've run that 7 times now. The first time in 2012, and the last time was in 2020, and we finished every time. And I think looking back, I think our performances again have improved every time. This year was our best finish. We finished 10th. A lot of that is due to the fact that it was so bloody cold that 3/4 of the field actually dropped out. But I think we still performed really well. The dogs ran so well on the final leg. That they're in such, I thought they were in such good condition. But when I look back to the mess that I was in 2012, that was the year that the race got postponed, got cancelled 80 miles into the race because they couldn't break the trail because there was so much snow. But I still count that as a finish. But I think that we've improved so much over the years just by being around other mushers and observing other people and seeing what other people are doing, and then bringing those lessons into our training program. As I said, we finished the Iditarod twice. I'll come back and discuss. We did scratch in 2018, and the Yukon Quest. Again, we've finished that 7 times now. Our first was in 2013. I took a break in 2014 when I was an official on the race. And again, that was a huge learning curve. I learned so much by being an official, by being able to stand back and objectively watch how other mushers interact with their dogs and the things they do. I learned a huge amount of lessons from that. And again, I think our performances on the Quest may not seem it from the results necessarily, but I think the dogs get better and better every year. As I said, we have scratched from a few races. I scratched from the Jinjin 200 in 2012, the Cusco 300 in 2017, and the Iditarod in 2018. And in all 3 cases, I don't think it had anything to do with nutrition, and it only really partly had to do with training. It was not in none of those 3 cases were the dogs at fault for the reasons why we scratched. In the 2012 Jinjin, it was only my second race. Our first race had been the Sheep Mountain 150, which wasn't particularly difficult. I made some massive mistakes on the Jinjin. I went in, I underestimated how difficult the conditions were going to be, how slow the trail was going to be. I didn't pack enough I didn't pack enough food in the sled. And when we got to the hospitality stop, which was about 60 miles into the race, I looked at how much food we had, and I managed to get talked into scratching. I didn't think I had enough food to get the dogs to the checkpoint, and there were a number of other teams were scratching because the trail conditions were pretty tough. And I allowed myself to get talked into scratching. I think, you know, if I was in the same position today, I think I'd have hopefully I wouldn't have made the mistake of not having enough dog food in the sled anyway. But I think I'd have gone on and we'd have been okay. But again, you know, it was a huge lesson to learn. With the Cusco in 2017, my main focus that year was on the Iditarod, and we picked up a few injuries in training the focus was the Yukon Quest. And I picked up a few injuries in training on 3 of the key dogs who I needed for the Yukon Quest. So I decided that I wasn't actually going to take those dogs to the Cusco. They were 3 of my better dogs, but I didn't want to risk them by taking them to the Cusco. So I put 3 other dogs in the team, and those 3 dogs had been training. You know, they probably had about 1,500 miles of training, but they hadn't been training to the same level of intensity of the other dogs. To get to the Cusco, it's about a 15-hour drive from here to Anchorage, and then you have to load the dogs onto an airline and fly them into Bethel. And then, you know, we were staying with a host family in Bethel who'd never been a host family before. It was their first winter in the community. They didn't know the trails or how the race was set up. And so from the time that we left, Whitehorse to the actual start of the race, which was probably about 12 days, we didn't train at all. So, you know, there we were with a team with 3 dogs which were undertrained, and the rest of the dogs hadn't trained at all. It was a brutally cold start to the race. The race starts, if I remember, it starts on Friday night. The temperatures were down, you know, -40s and -50s. It was brutally cold. We ran to the halfway point to the first checkpoint, and the first checkpoint is 100 miles, and most teams actually run straight to the first checkpoint, and that's in my opinion, that's just too far for a first checkpoint. So we camped halfway to the first checkpoint. Like I said, it was down towards -50. Everything was going really well. The dogs were going really well. And then about 10 miles outside of the checkpoint, 3 dogs developed myopathy. And they were the 3 dogs which were undermiled, the 3 dogs which I put into the team at the last moment. I ended up carrying all 3 dogs to the checkpoint. I thought we were actually going to lose one of the dogs. It was really touch and go, and I decided that this sled dog racing just wasn't for me. I was not going to risk my dogs in this way. So I scratched from the race, and I think it was the right decision to scratch. The other 9 dogs were unbelievable. Unbelievable. The other 9 dogs who'd had the intense training could definitely have gone on and finished. When you scratch from the Cusco, you pretty much have to charter an aircraft to get you back to the start line. You either run your dogs back to the start line, or you charter an aircraft. Now, we chartered an aircraft at some considerable cost, and trying to load 9 dogs into the back of a small aircraft, 9 dogs that are severely pumped up and excited, was a challenge in itself. So I know that those 9 dogs that had gone through the proper training could have definitely gone and finished. And then with the 2018 Iditarod, we came off a really difficult Yukon Quest. Again, it had been a brutally cold start to the Yukon Quest. I remember, we were camping between Eagle and Clinton Creek, and we were camping. We stayed up in the mountains, and it was -50. So further down near the 40 mile, the temperatures were probably down to -55, -60. So the whole start of the race was brutally cold. I can't remember racing in such cold conditions. And then towards the end of the race, we had exactly the opposite. The temperatures shot up. The temperatures were around freezing. We had heavy snow, lots of overflow, and it was an absolutely exhausting race. And I was pleased to finish. For those who don't know, the Iditarod starts about 2 weeks after the Yukon Quest finished, and so we rocked up in Anchorage. The dogs were fine. The dogs were fully recovered. And I was absolutely exhausted. I came very close to not starting. I was talking to James, my handler, at the morning of the restart, and said, "Look, I just don't want to do this. I'm just too exhausted. I want to scratch from the race." And Elizabeth might find it amusing that somebody could actually scratch before the actual race itself. But I did in fact start, but I was really demotivated. The dogs were great. I was having trouble getting the dogs to camp. They were so pumped up. and so eager to go. And then 120 miles into the race, I stopped at Finger Lake checkpoint and I got food poisoning, and that didn't manifest itself until about 80, till probably the most remote location. I got into Nikolai and I was constantly vomiting. I then, had a really bad stomach in Nikolai, and that just drained the last of my energy. We got to about 700 miles into the race, and I sat in a cabin in Tripod Flats, and I just don't want to do this anymore. I cannot face racing anymore. I'm getting too old and too tired. So I decided to scratch. So again, we didn't scratch because of nutrition. We didn't scratch because of training or the dogs. It really was my own weakness for the reason why we actually scratched. So yeah, I do think that, from what we're doing with nutrition and with training and that, the breeding program, which is, again, we'll talk a bit about, we are improving every year. And this is a shot from the finish line, coming into the finish line on this year's Yukon Quest. And I think it's the first time we've ever finished with all 14 dogs. And that was, for me, it was a great accomplishment. It's always nice to try and keep as many dogs with you as you possibly can. And the dogs were absolutely amazing. And again, when we talk about nutrition, I'll talk about some of the reasons why I think we finished with all 14 dogs. Because I think a huge part of it is actually down to nutrition. But again, for me, this emphasizes the fact that I think that we've improved every year, and we're improving because we're learning more and we're adapting our training program. So a lot of people, I think, when you talk about dog care and you talk about good dog care, a lot of people think that dog care is what you do on the race. It's seeing a vet come past and shoving an additional bit of straw under your dogs, or it's the massaging that you do and how you look after the dogs on the race, and it absolutely isn't. Dog care is actually what happens in your kennel year round. What happens on the race is only a really small part of good dog care. The main elements of good dog care is how you operate your kennel, how you look after your dogs year round, how you feed them, your breeding program, how you interact with your dogs, how you motivate your dogs and keep your dogs happy. So dog care really isn't what happens on the race. Dog care is what happens. Good dog care is what happens in the kennel year round. And these are really the three things that I think make up good dog care. And as I said before, this is just my opinion. I'm sure other people have other opinions. But the three things are breeding, feeding, and training. And I think if you can get those three things right, then you're going to set yourself up with a good dog team, whether that's for racing or for recreational mushing, or even just having happy, motivated dogs as companions in the house and in the kennel itself. I've put the three terms: long term, medium term, and short term, because I think that's how those three elements actually affect the status of your kennel. Breeding, to make a change in your kennel, to make a change in your attitude of your dogs, or how your dogs perform. It's a long-term impact. If you make a change if you do a breeding today, your dog team isn't going to change tomorrow. Your dog team isn't going to change in 6 months' time. It's going to be 2-3 years before your dog team changes. The only way that breeding and lines can actually make a short-term impact on your kennel is if you go and buy some adult dogs and put those adult dogs in the team. And I'll talk about that in a few slides' time, and why I don't think that's a particularly good idea. So I think that breeding is a long-term impact. Things that you do today, things that you do tomorrow, you're not going to see the benefits necessarily for 2 or 3 years down the line. And it could be, the rate some dogs mature, it could be 5 or 6 years before you see the benefits of a breeding program. Feeding, I think, has a medium-term impact. I remember, again, when we lived on the East Coast, I attended, I think it may have been an ISDRA conference, and it may even have been the trade fair, actually. Robert Downey was giving a presentation on canine nutrition, and not only is he an extremely accomplished musher, he was, at the time, he was the nutritional advisor to Animeat. And I picked up some good pointers, but the main thing I picked up was, he talked about the fact that If you change your dog food, it's going to take 3 months before your dogs are actually getting the benefit of that new dog food. And so his main point was, if you feed low quality dog food in the summer, and then when you start training, you transfer into high quality dog food, the dogs are not going to get benefit of that high quality dog food until 3 months further down the line. So say, for example, you go onto cheap dog food in April, when you finish running in April, as I know some mushers do. Then it's going to be, say you change at the end of April, so May, June, July, it's going to be the end of July before your dogs are actually, now their metabolism has switched over, and they're now being fed essentially by the cheap dog food. So then if at the end of August, you start training in August, and at the end of August, you decide that you're going to put your dogs onto high quality dog food, well, it's going to be then September, October, November. It's going to be December before your dogs are actually getting benefit from that high quality dog food. And so your dogs have trained for 3 months, pretty intensive training. They've been training on a low quality, poor dog food, and so they're not going to get the benefits. That's going to be detrimental to them. So you can make adjustments in your feeding program, and it's going to take 3 months for you to actually see that benefit. And so that's why I think that, I say that feeding has a medium-term impact on your kennel, on your lines, and on your dog's performance. And training, I think, is short-term. I think you could make a change in your training program today, and by the end of the week, you could start seeing benefits. So say for instance, you're training too hard, you're training too much, your dogs are getting demotivated, they're getting down, they're getting tired, they don't want to run. If tomorrow, if you ease back, you do shorter distances, you do less training, those dogs are going to recover in 2 to 3 days. So you can change your training program, and in 2 to 3 days, you can actually see an impact. John Chandlermeyer actually has a really good tip about this. That I'm sure if you're running mid or long distance, and you overrun your dogs, and you get your dogs get into this, people call it a death march, where you're just going down the trail at 2-3 miles an hour. You've run your dogs too hard, and all of a sudden, they just don't want to go anymore. Well, once that happens, you've lost that dog team. You're not going to recover that dog team in that race. They're going to stay at that slow speed. You're never going to recover that speed. But if you're going along and you see the dogs, you're running too hard, and you see the dog's speed starting to drop. Well, then if you cut back, if you then start doing short runs, instead of maybe doing 60 miles between camping trips, you do 30 miles between camping trips, and instead of doing 5-hour camps, you do 2-hour or 3-hour camps, then your dog team is going to turn around really quickly. So even in the space of a race, a mid-distance race, you can change how the dogs are running and see immediate benefits. So that's why I think that adaptations to training has a short-term impact. You can make a difference really quickly, and we'll talk about all three of these different aspects in turn. So I haven't checked to see who the participants are, but the majority of presentations I give are to a Siberian Husky audience. In fact, 99.9% of the time it's Siberian Huskies. So I'm not going to apologize. In fact, all the photographs that I'm going to show in this presentation are Siberian Huskies. But it really, I don't think it matters. From if you can look beyond the appearance, the eye sets, the ears, the head, maybe the muzzle, then the overall general construction for what is a good working dog is, in my opinion, it's the same for a Siberian Husky as it is for an Alaskan, as it is for a hound. I mean, they have different feet, they have different coats, but their construction is I think, is basically the same. If you go to the Iditarod, you go to the Yukon Quest, you go to any race, and you see the dogs that are performing well, they are essentially the same shape as this dog here, in terms of length of leg, the proportions of leg to length, the depth of chest. And there are people I can see on this call who are way more qualified than me to discuss this. So I'm not going to go into the specifics, but this, I see, what you see with this dog here, this Psycho. I could go and look at Jesse Royer's dogs. I can go and look at Brent Sass's dogs. I can go and look at Martin Boos's dogs. And in my opinion, the overall shape is exactly the same. And there's going to be differences in height, differences in length, but overall, I think the proportions are pretty much the same. And the reason that I think you see that is because this is an extremely efficient construction for a dog. And so when you're running, particularly when you're running mid distance and long distance, you need the dogs to be efficient. You need them to get down the trail and not be putting so much effort in that they're getting exhausted. So I saw some interesting, some of the people who are actually on this call now, I saw some interesting conversations this week about the difference between show Siberians and working Siberians. So I don't intend to offend anybody with this comment, but if you have a dog with really short legs and a really deep chest and its proportions are not right, that dog isn't going to run efficiently. You could get that dog to go down the trail at 2, 3, 4 miles an hour, and yeah, it could finish a 1,000-mile race, but it's not doing it efficiently, and it's not good for the dog. You really want the dog to have an efficient shape. And so this is what this is, from our observations from racing and showing in the UK, and what we saw when we were on the East Coast, and what we've seen since we've been in the North. This is the shape that we wanted from our dogs right from the very beginning. And I think when we look in our kennel today, I'll talk about consistency in a bit, but I think predominantly this is the shape that we actually have. And as I said, this presentation is focused on Siberian Huskies, but if you look at people who are performing at what I think is a high level with Siberian Huskies, essentially, the shape and the proportions are exactly the same. I mean, the dog on the left, Crunchy, Karen's best dog, phenomenal show dog, phenomenal working dog. If you look beyond the coat that he's got there, the proportions I think are exactly the same. We can run through and show dogs from other kennels. And like I said, you get beyond the coat. I mean, the coat is obviously slightly different in some dogs. Their weight can be slightly different, but I think their overall proportions are essentially the same. We get people telling us that, how are our dogs so different from Mike's dogs? And they're really not. You can tell Mike's dogs from coloration and from mask, but, in terms of shape, I think they're exactly the same. And I'll come on and talk about how I know that. This is he was one of my main leaders. He's sleeping in the kitchen about 15 feet away from me at the moment. He's now 15 years old. So this is Cybersong's Tragic Warrior, Hector. He was bred by Jay, and he's out of Mike's Four Winds to Suga stump. And again, I think he has got perfect construction. He was a phenomenal lead dog and a phenomenal working dog. Some of the other Siberian kennels, again, you need to get beyond the coat and the coloration. But this was Jim from Bob Klupatch's kennel. Again, a Siberian kennel doing mid-distance, distance and stage racing as well. And I think exactly the same construction. This was Tiggy, one of my best leaders from Karen. We had her from a puppy. Again, exactly the same construction. This was from JP Norris, and again, it's got the very, very well recognized Anadir look, particularly the head and the coloration. But the overall construction is exactly the same. So these photographs would show that the kennels, I think, which are performing well, are producing dogs with the same sort of proportion, same construction. As I said, it's not just Siberians; it's the same across all dogs, which we see performing at mid and long distance. When we came to Canada in 2005, we had 9 dogs at the time. We brought 2 puppies with us, and our intentions were to base our kennel around those 2 dogs, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But we knew we had to increase the number of dogs that we wanted, and so we scoured North America looking for dogs, and we brought dogs in from Alaska, we brought dogs in from the West Coast, from Alberta, a lot of dogs from the East Coast. But we were always looking for that same sort of construction, that sort of leg length. Looking at the parents, looking at the pedigrees, we thought we were bringing in dogs which we felt would be, in the long term, would be the ideal dogs for mid and long distance racing. And I'm just going to run through the team just very quickly that the dogs that finished the Yukon Quest this year, and hopefully when you look at each individual dog, you can see again the construction is the same as that first dog, the same as the Psycho, the first dog I showed you. So this is Redgrave. Again, this is from, we got Redgrave as a puppy from Mike and Sue, so that, this is how I know that that Tsuga dogs are really no different in construction to our dogs. This is Nix. He was bred by Lynn Sheffins, using one of our stud dogs. Bearing, who was bred by Yvonne de Back, and again using one of our stud dogs. But again, he is the hardest working dog that we have in the kennel. But again, I think, maybe a slightly different appearance, but overall his shape and construction is the same. Jack, partly out of Frecking lines and partly out of our own lines. This is Slug. He's out of Nix. He's in terms of the breed standard, he's over height. I would think we've never measured him, but I would definitely say he's over height. But again, his proportions are pretty much the same as the other dogs. When you look at the length, as I said, length of leg to length of body and chest, etc. Hitch, bred him from our Atheists litter. Some of the younger dogs. This is from the Druggers litter. This is Benny and his sister Wiz and their sister Lucy. This is Mrs. Hudson from the Sherlock's litter. She's a daughter of Psycho. And again, I talked about consistency before. I think what you see with every dog is every dog is, I think personally, is very consistent. Into the Swearers litter. This is Lazy Ass. Not the best photograph. This is Cockwomble, and the final two that made up the team. I put this in because I just love this photograph. This is Arseface and Denny, who did a lot of leading on the Yukon Quest this year. So I just touch really very quickly on breeding. Do you breed or do you buy? When you're looking at your lines and how that's going to impact going forward. I think if you go and buy dogs, then that can have a short-term benefit. I said before, the only way that breeding and lines can have a short-term impact on your kennels is if you go and buy dogs. So if you go to a kennel and you buy some 4 or 5 year olds, and they've it's from a kennel that's been doing some mid or long distance racing, or any racing whatsoever, then you can put those dogs into your team and they can have an immediate impact. Particularly if they're leaders, the other dogs will learn off those dogs, and you will learn off those dogs. But what we found from our own experience when we brought in older dogs is very quickly you'll actually the ability of your own dogs will very quickly catch up and pass those dogs. So you're only going to get a short-term benefit, I think, from bringing in older dogs. If you go to a kennel and buy an older dog, you're not getting somebody's best dogs. No matter what somebody may tell you, they're not going to sell you their best dogs. And I actually had this argument with somebody, had a discussion with somebody in Russia last year where this person was adamant that she had got the best dogs from a kennel, and you just don't. The only way you're going to get someone's best dogs is if a person is clearing out their kennels, if they make a mistake, or if they sell you a dog which turns out to be different to what they thought. The other problem with buying older dogs is you don't know the background of those dogs. You don't know what's happened in that dog's life before. It could have been in multiple kennels. It could be aggressive. It could be, it could show traits you don't want on the trail. It may have bad feet. It may be a bad eater. You just don't know. If you're buying a dog, you just don't know the background of that dog. So you're always taking a risk. Some dogs will only perform for one dog, for one person. When I said people don't give you their best dogs, well, somebody actually did give us their best dog. They were actually clearing out their kennel, and Paul Whitney gave us Kraken's Kermit. That turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to us. It really transformed our kennel and transformed our breeding program. When we actually went over to Thunder Bay in Ontario to see Paul and to meet Kermit in 2005, 2006. And I had the privilege of actually double sledding behind Kermit. I saw what an absolutely amazing leader he was. Well, when he came to us and he was 8 years old, so he was still capable of racing. And I could run him in the team. He ran in the Can-Am 250, sorry, the Can-Am 60 with me, but he would not race for me. He was, he would not lead for me. Sorry, he was Paul's leader, and he knew that I was an idiot, and he wasn't going to be listening to me. So you always have this risk that a dog may only perform for one person. You may bring a dog into a kennel, and that dog may not perform to the same level for you. And when you're buying adult dogs, they've been trained by somebody else. And it could be good training, or it could be bad training. But even with good training, it may be training that doesn't fit in with what you want from that dog. It maybe doesn't fit in with your training program. And it's, the saying about old dogs and new tricks is perfectly true. It's much harder to undo a dog's previous training than it is to begin training from a puppy itself. So I think those are some of the reasons, some of the detrimental reasons for actually buying adult dogs. Raising puppies, that you're handling them from day one. They know you, they trust you, you know them. You're training them from the start, so you're the only person who should be training those dogs. So you're going to be training them from day one the way you want to train them. They know the other dogs in your kennel, which I think is really important. They may not like every other dog in the kennel, but they know every other dog in the kennel. You hear some horror stories of people who bring dogs in at the last moment. They're short of a couple of dogs for the Iditarod. A few days before the race, they borrow some dogs off somebody else, and it turns into a nightmare. There's dogs that have been killed. As a result of this, there's teams that have scratched. It's just not a good idea to introduce teams to unknown dogs to a team at the last moment. So if you're raising puppies, yourself, they know their litter mates, and they know the other dogs in the kennel. And I think most importantly, the dog as well. You know what that dog is capable of. You know the warning signs. When you're on a race, if a dog, some dogs just don't eat very well on the race, and that's not a problem as long as you know that. So those dogs. I think the bottom line for me is it's always better to breed than to buy. Particularly if you have a long-term vision and you want to get to the Iditarod, or you want to get to the Yukon Quest, or even if you want to do competitive sprint racing, I think it's always better to actually to breed dogs yourself than to buy. When you're trying to find your own lines, how do you go about this at the beginning? I mean, for us, and I think for most people, the starting place is pedigrees, and you may say, well, that's a purebred thing. Whereas, it's really not. I can tell you of some Alaskan mushers I know who are way more anal when it comes to pedigrees than purebred people are. So don't believe that an Alaskan Husky doesn't have a pedigree. They really do, and people really do concentrate on pedigrees. If you're trying to find stud dogs, or you're trying to, find puppies to buy, which kennels you want to buy puppies from, then look at the race performances. This is one of the things that we did when we came in 2005. We were looking at how other Siberian kennels around the country were doing at racing and perform, and not just looking at, say, teams like, Karen and Blake and Jen and Mike, who were racing long distance. We were looking at, Karen Yeargain and how her dogs were performing in races. How people such as Jay and Kim and Kelly were doing in races. And so, race performance can give you a really good indication of whether you're looking at the right kennel. And you don't necessarily, for us, you don't necessarily need to look at a long distance kennel just for long distance dogs. A good working dog is a good working dog. And I think particularly with Siberians can perform at any distance. A good sprint Siberian can perform just as well at long distance as well. It's not distance dependent. When you're looking for lines, talk to other mushers and talk to other mushers that you trust. Not every musher is going to tell you the truth, and sometimes you need to take a pinch of salt with people's opinions, I think. But talk to other mushers about where you should go with lines, and what dogs you should be using for breeding, and what you should be looking for. Don't stay local. I mean, you hear this, so much. You talk to somebody, why did you use that stud dog? Well, he was, in the next kennel 10 miles down the road. That's not a reason to use a dog use a dog at stud. If you want to do a breeding and you're looking for a stud dog, then you should be scouring the country to find the best dog. And you should do everything you possibly can in terms of finance and in terms of logistics to use other dogs and to go to other kennels. Like I said, don't stay local. When we started looking in 2005, as I said, we brought dogs in from Alaska, from the East Coast. There are some long and expensive flights for some of those dogs, but in the long term, it's definitely worth it. And be prepared to pay as well. If you want a puppy from a kennel which has spent 10, 15, 20 years developing their own lines, and they're doing well at long distance or mid distance, then they've invested a huge amount of time and money in that kennel. And so you need to be prepared to actually spend more than maybe you want for a stud free or for a puppy, but also be selective and be careful. I know people who are selling puppies, Siberian puppies, for $2,000 and $2,500, and I wouldn't go anywhere near those dogs. They shouldn't be selling those dogs for $500, let alone $2,500. So be selective, and make sure that you're getting. This should be a long-term investment. These dogs should be, whether you do your own breeding or buying puppies, these dogs are going to be with you for the next 15 years. So be really selective and get the best, which is going to give you the best further down the lines. And look at a kennel's breeding ethos. If a kennel breeds 2-3 times a year and they tend to keep all of those puppies or most of those puppies, and it's hard to get a puppy off them, then they're obviously breeding because they want to improve their team, or they want to improve their lines. If you have a kennel which is breeding 4, 5, 6, 7 times a year and they're selling most of those puppies, or selling all of them, then that's not necessarily a kennel you'd want to go and buy a puppy from, because they're just not. They obviously don't have a considered breeding program. They're not trying to achieve the same objectives as you are. If you go to those kennels if there's something really specific, if there's a really specific line that you want. But in general, look at the kennel's breeding ethos when you're selecting puppies and selecting studs. And obviously, dogs should be health checked as well. I mean, we do eye testing. We don't do hip testing anymore. For a dog, for us to breed a dog, it really should have finished the quest of the Iditarod, and I think that's a better measure of a dog's hips than any X-ray is ever going to be. And so, hopefully, if you follow all this, you'll end up with the dogs that you want going forward. And the dogs that are going to shape your lines into the future, and the dogs that are going to give you pleasure, whether that's racing, recreational mushing, or just dogs in the kennel. This is Maddie. I put this up just because it's Maddie. She's retired now. She's 11 years old. She was my best leader by far. She was from our second litter, a litter called the Crazies. There was 5 in this litter, 4 males and a female. So Maddie, Skit, Psycho, Nutter, and Looney. Their mother, Medea, was one of the puppies that we brought across from the UK in 2005. We identified her as a potential breeding in 2003. We were really interested in the mother's pedigree, which there was a lot of going back into the first Lockie Bowdens that were taken into the UK. So as far back as 2003, we wanted to make this dog part of our lines, and it was 2009 before we finally got to do the breeding, but it's the breeding that we wanted, but it worked out really, really well. So the Crazy litter, between them, they took part in 9 1,000-mile races. If you look at each individual dog and add up their finishes, they're 33,000-mile finishes. 2 of them, Nutter and Looney, finished 8 of the 9, and the 9th was the 2018 Iditarod, which we scratched from. They all have 6 Copper Basin finishes, multiple other mid-distance racing. They all lead, and they're not just dogs that you put in front of a team as fillers. They are all they were all really good leaders. And Maddie was a really good single leader, and she was definitely the reason why we finished the 2015 Yukon Quest, and probably the reason why we finished the 2017 Yukon Quest. So it took us 6 years of planning, and it took us we invested a lot of time and effort to get Kermit to use Kermit, which was the dog we identified early on that we wanted for that breeding, but it really did work out for us. And now when you look at our kennel, I'm currently training 32 dogs, and only 2 of those dogs are not related to the crazes in some way or other, not just the crazes. Also, we did a repeat breeding and had the atheist litter as well. So 30 out of 32 dogs are now based on that original female that we bought in 2003. And so, yeah, I think now what we have is consistency. When, I talked before about the importance of construction, and that efficient, length of leg to proportion to length of body to etc. I'm confident now that whenever we do a breeding, that's what we're going to get. You may get the odd throwback. Slug is a lot bigger than the standard. We got a couple of other dogs which are towards the bottom of the standard, but we get that proportion that we want every time. So pretty much, we now get consistency. So we don't have, when we're planning a breeding, we don't have to think about, is this going to give us the right looking Siberian Husky? We're pretty confident it's going to give us, the dog with that shape for mid and long distance racing. So now we can focus on attitude, and this is what I think is the most important thing for us when we're doing breedings. We want to do breedings with males and females that have really good attitude. So what do I mean by attitude? Well, it's the desire to want to go, for one thing. That they always want to run, not just at the start of racing either, or in training. That 3 o'clock in the morning they want to get up off the straw. And they want to go. You're not forcing them. You're not forcing them to run. So they have that attitude, and it's not just actually running down the trail. It's how they deal with difficult conditions when the snow gets really deep, when you're stuck on the side of a mountain in a snowstorm. The dogs with attitude are the ones that you call them up and they get up and they go. When you're in really warm temperatures, really deep snow, they just want to keep driving forward. And so that's what we're looking for now when we do breedings, is we're looking for dogs that have that really special attitude. So that's really all I want to talk about on lines, and that's probably more than I should have talked about. But if people do have any questions, I mean, you can, like I said, you can either put them into the chat function, or we can go through questions at the end as well. So the next aspect is feeding. This is how we feed. Again, as with breeding, and when I come on to training, what I'll discuss is exactly what we do. We have absolutely no secrets whatsoever. I'm going to tell you exactly how we feed. There are elements in this presentation which I know people will disagree with, and that's fine. You have to do what works for you. All I can say is that the way we feed works for us. I am super happy with how our dogs perform, and I'm super happy with how they look, and I'm super happy with their attitude in racing. And so I'm not going to make drastic changes to the breeding program. We soak our kibble in water for 12 hours before we feed it. And I've had arguments and discussions with people who say, you shouldn't soak kibble. It is bad to soak kibble. And, we can discuss at the end of the presentation what the two sides of the argument are. For us, soaking kibble for 12 hours works, and so I'm not gonna change that. So like I said, there's no secrets whatsoever. This is exactly how we feed. It's exactly the supplements that we feed, and I'll explain why we use some of those supplements. And take away from it what you want. But this works for us. So feeding, I talked about this 3-month effect before. What Robert Downey had said about feeding good quality food year round, and we do. We feed the best possible food that we can feed year round, and it really does cost us a fortune. We feed red paw, and with shipping, it's about $75 a bag. That bag will last us a day and a half typically. I'll talk about we feed 38% red paw when we get into when we get into the heavy training and racing, and that's just over $100 a bag. And again, that lasts us about a day and a half. So it's not a lie when I say that we spend way more on the dog food than we spend on ourselves. But I think it's worth it. I see so such a high level of performance with Red Paw, and I'm not sponsored by Red Paw at all, but it's just, I think it's just such an amazing food. So you really should try and feed the best possible food that you can, and you should feed it year round. We feed the same at home as we feed on the trail. So it's exactly the same food, exactly the same mix. The only difference between at home and on the trail is at home, we feed twice a day. And when we're on the trail, particularly on a race like the Quest, we tend to be feeding 4 times a day. And I'll talk about that in a bit, about why we're trying to put so many calories into the dogs. I mentioned that, the conversation I had with the musher at the Can-Am, there really are huge benefits from feeding meat. Again, we can discuss after the presentation the argument about whether you feed kibble or you feed raw. I personally don't think you can feed an all raw diet to a racing sled dog team. I don't have the skills or the background to feed raw diet all the time, to make a raw diet in the kitchen. And I think, just the ingredients, the amount of food you need, you can't feed a purely raw diet on the trail itself, particularly on a 1,000-mile race. So we feed a balance of kibble and meat. And again, the kibble Red Paw has been specifically designed for working dogs. I'll talk a bit about vitamin E in a couple of slides. The vitamin E level in Red Paw has been enhanced because it was seen as being a problem. Vitamin E deficiency is seen as being a problem in endurance dogs, and so these foods have been developed for working dogs. So it's why not feed them. Year round, we feed the 32% Red Paw, which is 32% protein and 20% fat. 3 months before we start racing, we'll switch the racing dogs onto the 38% protein, and we do it 3 months before, so that by the time we get to the race, they're actually getting that benefit. The other dogs, so as I said, if I'm training 32 dogs at the moment, probably by about December, I'll drop down to 18 to 20 dogs, and those will be the dogs in a typical Quest year that I would pick the final 14 from. And so those 18 to 20 dogs would then switch onto the 38K Red Paw. The other dogs, if they're staying in training, will stay on the 32%. There's no detriment to them, and they just don't need that higher level of protein. But the dogs that we want to see racing, we want those on the 38% protein. So we make that switch, like I said, 3 months before our first races. And then we feed a variety of different types of meat. We predominantly beef is the main meat that we feed. We used to feed horse. Horse was a really good substitute for beef. If the dogs were getting fed up with beef, then horse was a good substitute. Unfortunately, there's been a number of instances over the last 5 years, where teams have failed drug tests on the Quest because of some trace elements that have been found in the dog's urine, and that's pretty much been agreed that is coming through from horse meat. The Quest came out with an advisory a few years ago to stop feeding horse meat. I think it was about a month before the race, and that way, the dog's system should be clear of any possible steroids or anything at that time. But we made the decision, when that first team was failed its drugs test, and word came back that it was the horse meat that was causing it. We made the decision that we would stop feeding horse meat altogether. I don't want that crap going into my dog's body. So other meats that we feed, turkey and chicken. The chicken that we get tends to be really fatty. By far the easiest way to stop a dog team from eating is give it too much fat, particularly too much fat when it's warm. So we're really careful about when we feed chicken. I often won't feed chicken unless it's below -10 Celsius. Often, if I'm feeding regular chicken, it needs to be a lot colder than that. But it's a really good food to feed when it's cold, and it's a really good alternative to chicken. Other things, obviously fish and salmon. Salmon, like I said, turkey. pork if we can, can get hold of it. Beaver is a really good food for, as I'm sure most of you know, is a really good food for trail snacks. If dogs won't eat anything else, they'll tend to eat beaver. And the whole point of this feeding program is to maintain the dogs in really good weight. We want throughout, from the start of the race to the finish of the race, we want the dogs to maintain really good weight, because it helps prevent injuries, helps with their endurance, helps with their stamina, and keeps them happy and motivated as well. The daily requirements for a working sled dog, this is for a 20 kilogram, 40 pound dog, just generally 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day. When you're getting up to mid-distance racing, you're having to put 10 to 12,000 calories in a dog a day. So it's a huge increase from just the maintenance that you would do, maybe that you'd be feeding in the summer. And this is why we're trying to feed 4 times a day when we're on the quest and on the Iditarod. 3 to 4 times a day, and we also snack every hour as well between camping as well. So we're putting a huge amount of food into the dogs to try and to keep their body weight up. Most races, use the Purina body condition system for assessing dogs. I don't know how clear that is on the screen, but we're trying to keep our dogs in the 4 to 5 range. When we go into the start of the quest, we really want our dogs to be 5s and possibly even 6s. There's nothing wrong with, I don't think, starting a long distance race with a dog which is slightly overweight. That the dog is going to convert that weight to muscle pretty quickly, and it's going to drop some weight as well. So we try and have our dogs definitely as 5s, but probably at the lower end of 5s. If you're starting a race with a dog that's a 3, then that's really not a good place to be. A dog can lose weight really quickly. If it turns out that the race is super cold, then you just can't get enough calories into a dog to maintain body weight, and it's going to drop to a 2 and it's going to drop to a 1. Once they're getting down into those levels, then they're going to be picking up injuries really easily. They're really susceptible to illnesses, to viruses. They can get sick really quickly, and in the extreme, dogs can die. So you really want to try and keep a dog's body weight up, and it can be a struggle. Particularly, as I said, during a cold race, it can be really difficult to keep a dog at a 4 or a 3. You just really have to be piling the calories into the dogs as much as you possibly can, and assessing your dogs and working with the vets as well, and listening to what the vets are saying about your dogs. It's the body condition system can be pretty subjective at times. You can go to one vet and they'll tell you your dog's a 4, and you go to another one, they'll tell you it's a 3. But you learn which dogs, which vets you can trust, and if you can get consistency with the same vets looking at the dogs all the time, then you can get a good, reliable indication of how your dogs are doing in terms of weight. And you see this in a lot of races where teams are actually held in checkpoints and told to feed more food into their dogs to try and get them back up towards a 3 or a 4. So everything we do is to try and maintain a really good body condition score. And these are just 4 examples of what I think dogs, a good condition for dogs actually going into a race. I think these dogs they're probably high end 4s or maybe low 5s. I think these is what we're looking for in the dogs coming into the race, and obviously it's important to actually go in and feel the dogs as well. The coat can hide quite a lot, but this is the sort of thing that we're looking for. So we feed year round. We feed the 32% protein. You can see the guaranteed analysis on the left hand side. When you look at the ingredients, the first 4 or 5 ingredients are meat or fish based. I guess you do have corn as the second ingredient, but the main ingredient is fish meal. When you look at the 38%, you have 38% protein, 25% fat. And then you look at the first ingredients there, fish meal, poultry byproduct, poultry fat, and then before you're getting into the first of the grains, etc. So it's in my opinion a really good high quality food. the way that we feed the dogs, as I said, we have 56 dogs in the kennel, so we tend to make up four buckets of food a day, and these are 5-gallon buckets. In the summer, we'll put in 18 cups. We can't feed meat in the summer; we can only feed it in the winter. There's very little agriculture in the Yukon, so that there's very little cattle, so there's very little opportunity to buy meat. A lot of us live off grid and we live remotely. We don't have freezers, and so there's no way to actually store meat over the summer. So it's really difficult to get meat here in the summer. So we just have to feed kibble mostly over the summer months. What tends to happen is that in September, one of the mushers will send out an email for meat orders, and we would order probably 3 tons of meat in September. And then once we start to consistently get temperatures below freezing in sort of middle to end of October, then the meat is brought across from Quebec, and we can then leave it stored outside without too many worries of it actually thawing throughout the day. So in the summer we can only feed kibble. So we'll make up this a 5-gallon bucket. And we'll put in 18 cups of kibble. Then in the winter, we'll reduce the amount of kibble, but the dogs will get meat. And typically each day, a dog will get, on average, about 2 cups of kibble and 1 pound of meat plus supplements every day. And as I said before, we believe in soaking the kibble. So as soon as we feed a meal, we make up the next meal and fill it full of water. So what you see on the left-hand side, that will be 18 cups of kibble and then 5 gallons of water. And we leave that to soak for about 12 hours. One bucket in the summer will feed 19 dogs, and it will probably feed about 14 dogs in the winter. And we feed twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. And we use these scoops. The scoop is approximately 250 milliliters, and we use the scoops to actually transfer the food from the bucket to the dogs. And every meal can be different. When we're feeding the dogs, we're looking at their weight. We're looking at what sort of training we're doing and what the temperatures are like. So they're not going to get a consistent one scoop every meal. How much we feed them is going to change pretty much on a meal by meal basis, depending on, like I said, the temperatures, how they're looking, and what training they're doing. And again, we do the same on the trail. We obviously can't soak the kibble for 12 hours on the trail, but when we get into a checkpoint, we do our initial checkpoint routine. Then we put the kibble and the frozen meat into a cooler and put hot water on that, and we leave it for about 20 minutes. And the hot water with the kibble will start to break the kibble down, so the dogs are still going to be getting a good level of water from the kibble. So some of the supplements that we feed, and the reasons why we actually give those supplements. All of these things are really important in any racing discipline, whether it's sprint or distance. But for us particularly, we want the dogs to have a good coat. So that they can deal better with the cold. They can deal better with they're less prone to frostbite. And a good healthy coat is it's a sign of a good healthy dog. Paws are obviously important. When we're racing, we booty all the time, but we still want the strongest, best possible paws we can get. For joints, we give supplements for their joints to not just for mobility, to help their mobility for racing. We find that they recover, by giving joint supplements, the dogs recover much quicker from injuries on the trail. But it's also for the longevity of the dogs. All the dogs live with us from puppies through until when they pass away, and we don't, we have very few issues with arthritis. In fact, we haven't got a single dog in the kennel that's got arthritis. There's a 17-year-old who wanders around the kitchen. She's got no issues whatsoever with joint problems. So, I think it's a good thing to be feeding these supplements throughout their lives to actually improve on the longevity. And supplements can help with other things such as digestion and hydration, and can improve energy and stamina as well. So some of the supplements we use, fish meal is one that we use on a regular basis when we're into heavy training and racing. We'll put two teaspoons of fish meal in with each bucket, and you can see It comes in a powdered format, so it's a high quality protein. You can see there, 65% protein effectively, but it's in a powder format, so it gets absorbed into the water, so it's really easy for the dogs to digest. And it's high in omega-3 fatty acids as well. And I'm not going to attempt to pronounce their actual scientific names, but those are the two, DHA and EPA are the two fatty acids, the two most important fatty acids for endurance sled dogs. So we also get those fatty acids through fish oil as well. And again, fish oil is a really good source of energy and a really good source of calories, and it's not bulky at all. It's in an oil format, so it's really a really good way to get calories into the dogs. It helps with the coat. It helps increase stamina in the short term. Over the longer term, it decreases inflammation in skin and joints. So it's going to help. It's going to help dogs recover from injuries, and long term, it's improves the immune system and reduces heart disease. And the dogs get 1 scoop per bucket per day, apart from when we feed corn oil. Corn oil is high in omega-6 fatty acids and linoleic acid. It's not as beneficial as the omega-3 fatty acids, but it's still important that the dogs are getting this omega-6 fatty acid. And again, pretty much the same benefits: calories, energy, reproduction, growth, and immune function. And it's good for the skin and coat. But you need to be feeding proportionally more omega-3 than you are omega-6. So the recommended ratio is 5:1. So we will have 5 days in a row, we'll give fish oil, and on the 6th day, we will give corn oil. Or you could also give something like poultry fat as well. Liquefied poultry fat as well. So like I say, 5:1 omega-3 to omega-6. I mentioned a couple of times the importance of joints. So we put a spoonful of joint formula in with every bucket. This is what we were using last year. We're just actually changing over to a different joint formula at the moment, and the reason for that is COVID. We can't get across the border to get to cold spot. So pretty much whatever we want to give to the dogs now, we have to try and source in Canada. But basically it's glucosamine and chondroitin, and it's a really good joint and cartilage supplement. It also, this particular formula also has additional vitamin C for water soluble antitoxin, and it's good for creation of collagen for connective tissue. So it's really good for joints. As I said, that's not just for the long term life of the dogs. It also helps with the mobility for the working dogs, and also it definitely helps in recovery from injuries as well. I attended a really good seminar in Austria last summer, and there was a good presentation on natural supplements and natural feeding. And I picked up a huge amount of tips from that, and decided that we wanted to integrate more natural products into the diet. So these are some of the things that we added in. Green-lipped mussels. It comes in a powdered format. It's a natural anti-inflammatory. It's again good for joints, protects cartilage, so it's helping prevent injuries and also helping recovery from injuries, and it boosts immunity and helps against arthritis in the long term. So we just started supplementing with that last year. Zinc gluconate we've been using for a number of years. Again, this is powder format, one spoon per bucket per day, and it's really good for improving pads, hardening up pads, and it's good for a healthy coat, and particularly with some Siberians, you get a zinc deficiency as well. So we add the gluconate to the food buckets on a daily basis. Another tip which came from the workshop last year was kelp. Again, this comes in a more dried, sort of powdered format. It really needs to be the Northlandic or Icelandic kelp. And again, you can see the Latin name. There are many different types of kelp, but this is the one you really want to try and source for use as a supplement. And again, you can see the number of benefits there, an improvement in digestion, so it helps the dogs digest their food better, good for skin and coat, and again, it's longer term,
It helps with the immune system, and it helps fight against disease, and improves healing. Psyllium, we've been using psyllium for a number of years, and the main reason we add this to the food is it prevents diarrhea. It really does help the dogs have good solid stools. Whether that's diarrhea from stress, from traveling, when we're trying to whack so many calories into the dogs, then they can get diarrhea that way, and it's you quite often pick up sicknesses on races as well. So there's many reasons why you get diarrhea, but once a dog has diarrhea, it's what it's passing out is a huge amount of water, so it's going to get dehydrated really quickly. So we do everything we can to prevent the dogs from getting diarrhea, and we find that psyllium actually works really well. So again, it's a powder format, and one large teaspoon in each bucket every day. When we're feeding meat, we also add bone meal to the buckets as well. And the idea of adding bone meal is it improves the calcium phosphorus balance. It's been shown that meat is very high in phosphorus, but low in calcium. And if you're getting too much phosphorus in the diet, then dogs are going to start getting renal issues. And so we add bone meal to try and provide that balance between the calcium and phosphorus. And so far we've never seen any issues. And again, it's 1 teaspoon per bucket per day. This came from the presentation in Austria. We really wanted to start using probiotics and natural probiotics, and we found that Dr. Carson's was phenomenal. They do a lot of work with mushers across the world. We started using this last year, and we saw, I think, an amazing difference in the dogs. I think this made a huge difference to the dogs. I'll talk about this a bit when we discuss training, but one of the reasons we do races before, if the Yukon Quest is our main race, then 3 weeks before we'll go to the Copper Basin, and there are one of the benefits of going to the Copper Basin is that their dogs are coming in from all across Alaska, all across Canada, and sometimes from around the world. And these are dogs which have been kept, largely in isolation throughout their training period. And so they've been exposed to bugs and viruses in their areas, and they've built up immunity to it, but they're still carrying those bugs and viruses. And we found in the past that, when we go to Copper Basin, we're exposing our dogs to all these other bugs and viruses. And so dogs, the dogs actually quite often get sick just after Copper Basin. We come back from Copper Basin, the dogs will get sick, but then they'll recover really quickly. And then by the time we got to the quest, the dogs have then themselves built up an immunity to all these different bugs, which coming from the other kennels. And so the dogs then don't get sick on the quest because they have this immunity. And we've definitely seen this. I saw some teams scratch. I think it was the 2017 or 2018 Yukon Quest, where our dogs had got sick after Copper Basin, recovered, and then there were a couple of teams that hadn't done any pre-racing, got sick at the start of the quest with exactly the same. You could tell from the symptoms it was exactly the same, and so they ended up having to scratch. This year at Copper Basin, again, there was the usual. A lot of dogs were sick, and people reporting after the race that their dogs had got sick. Our dogs did not get sick at all. They didn't pick up any bugs whatsoever. We came back and the dogs were really healthy after Copper Basin. We got to the quest, and again there was a lot of sickness, a lot of diarrhea, a lot of viruses around in both the Quest 300 and the Quest. And again, we had no problems whatsoever. We had one dog developed mild diarrhea about 3/4 of the way for the race, and he improved over the space of a checkpoint. The dogs we had 2 injuries throughout the whole race. One wrist injury. Normally a wrist injury will recover, over 50 to 100 miles. If you work on that wrist, the dog will recover. This particular dog recovered over the space of a camping session, so over 5 hours, by massaging, and that dog was recovered after as we were leaving the camping spot. A shoulder injury, I would normally drop a dog with a shoulder injury without even thinking about it, but this we worked with the vets and we massaged the dog, and the dog made a full recovery. So I really do think that the reason why we got no injuries, or the injuries recovered really quickly, the reason why we got no sickness, we got no diarrhea, And the reason why the dogs ate so well throughout the whole race was because of the supplements that we added, and because we added probiotics. I was skeptical about probiotics in the past, and now I'm hugely in favour of feeding the dogs probiotics. Other supplements that you can give to the dogs, obviously electrolytes, used a lot by sprint mushers to help the dogs recover their electrolyte balance between races. It's not something that we do, and there's a couple of studies have been done with long distance dogs where there's not necessarily any benefit in giving electrolytes to dogs doing endurance racing. I talked a bit about vitamin E when I was discussing red paw. So it's been shown again through testing that the majority of dogs, by far the majority of dogs that are failing to finish an endurance race, have lower levels of vitamin E. I'm not sure why, and the research doesn't specify why, but it's just it's one of those research points that's been noted. So it's been recommended that you supplement with vitamin E, and certainly a higher meat diet means lower vitamin E. But it's important that you don't overdose. If you start giving a dog too much vitamin E, then he's going to have issues with its blood clotting, or not clotting, as the case may be. So, as I said, red paw has additional vitamin E in it, so we don't actually supplement with vitamin E. Famotidine and omeprazole we do use, one or the other. These are, the common name is Pepcid or Prilosec, and it's a conversation on its own, whether you use Pepcid or Prilosec, but in the mid to late 90s, the main source of dogs getting dropped, and the main source certainly of deaths in long distance racing dogs was gastric ulcers. And it's definitely been shown that using famotidine or omeprazole will actually prevent gastric ulcers. And today you hardly hear about dogs with gastric ulcers, and certainly not dogs dying from gastric ulcers. And as I said, omeprazole, Prilosec is the best, but it has to be fed on an empty stomach. And so we tend to use Pepcid because it fits better in with how we feed the dogs and how we snack the dogs. But they're both good. Prilosec is definitely the best. So that's nutrition. Just checking on time. I guess we're going to run over it. There's probably about another 10 to 15 minutes on training and conditioning. So I'll try and whistle through as quickly as I can. I can't emphasize enough the importance of early season training. I think that, we start training this year. We started training in June. It's been a really cool and wet summer. So we were able to start training in June, and we've kept training all the way through. Typically we'll start in late July or August. But, I personally think the most important training period is from, August through until end of September, beginning of October. That's when you're doing slow training. The dogs are pulling the ATV. You're doing shorter runs, but what they're doing is building up endurance. They're slowly but surely building up the proper muscles. Their joints are getting exercised at slow rates. So there are huge long-term benefits over the course of a winter by doing proper early season training and intense early season training. Then that's got a massive benefit over the rest of the year. I'd rather skip a training session in December than I would skip a training session in September. I do think it's really important that you do early season training. And so we like I said, we start as early as we can. I'll go back and talk a bit about conditioning in a minute. I'll look at some aspects of training that we do. I don't know if Jay's still on the call, but she may recognise the top two dogs, Hector and Paris. Both phenomenal dogs, phenomenal leaders, and they're the ones that we really started doing line out training with, and they quickly picked up on it, and they've taught. They've taught all the other dogs how to do it, and I think it's vitally important. It's such an important thing to teach your dogs to line out like this. The leaders are the first dogs that we hook up, and we then hook up the swing dogs, the team dogs, and the wheel dogs. And when we finish the run, they're the last dogs to come off. So when we're putting the dogs back in their pens, we start at the back and we work our way forward. So the leaders really are the two dogs that are in the lead are the first ones on and the last ones off. And we train all the dogs in lead to actually line out like this. And we want, we don't want them going off and sniffing around in the bush or visiting other dogs. When we're racing, we're coming into a checkpoint, we want them to line out. We don't want people holding the dogs. I think it's vitally important that the dogs make their own decisions about, what they're going to do, whether they're going to mess around or whether they're going to pull to the left, pull to the right. And if you have somebody holding your dogs, then you're taking that decision away from them, so they can just switch off. So it's really important, that for us, that when we come into checkpoints, we don't want people holding them. We want the dogs to line out. When we're camping by the side of the trail, we want to call the dogs to the side of the trail and pull up at the side of the trail, and for the dogs to wait until we've got their tug lines undone and got the straw down. So, I can't, lining out, we spend a huge amount of time on that. And it can be slow and laborious, but it's, one of the most beneficial aspects of training. When we're training, we try and go out and find some of the conditions that we may see in the race. We don't want dogs to be experiencing things for the first time in a race. So we'll go and try and find water for the dogs to run through, so that, when they come across overflow on a race or open water, it's not going to be a surprise to them. This is taking it to the extreme, but like I said, we really want the dogs to experience in training what they could experience when they come to a race, so that there's no surprises and there's nothing to freak them out or stress them out. We also spend a huge amount of time teaching the dogs to run on the right side of the trail. When we first came across in the UK, funnily enough, they all ran on the left-hand side, but we now spend a lot of time teaching them to run on the right-hand side. And it's not just beneficial when there's traffic around. It actually has a vital importance when it comes to actually racing itself. We end up with a lot of head-on passing and passing from behind when we're racing. And so we want the dogs to, both the team coming at you and the team going in the other direction. If you're both on the right hand side, then you're gonna pass pretty effectively. And again, if you're getting passed from behind and you're on the right hand side, it's hard over on the right hand side, then it's much easier for the team coming past you to come past as well. So we do spend a lot of time teaching the dogs to run on the right hand side. And we're lucky where we live. There's a lot of dog teams around here, and most of them are training for distance or mid distance, and so we can end up, even on an evening run, we can end up with 3 or 4 passes on an evening. So we automatically start getting passing practice going on. And then camping, we spend a lot of time practicing camping. When we're racing, whether it's mid distance or long distance, you often camp on the side of the trail, or when you come into checkpoints, you're effectively camping in checkpoints. And so when we're in training, we spend a lot of time going through camping. So that, we'll run maybe 40 miles and then rest and camp for 4 to 5 hours, and we go through exactly the same routine when we're camping as we're going to go through when we're in a checkpoint on the race. So the dogs know exactly what's going to happen. We stop, we put in the hook behind the sled. I'll grab a bag of snacks and the leader hook, and we'll walk up the line, giving each dog a snack and undoing their tug lines. Then we get to the leaders, we put the leader hook in, and then we walk back down and we take the dog boots off. Once we get back to the sled, we'll grab the bale of straw, whether it's a bale of straw that's actually on the sled itself, or whether a volunteer has brought the straw, and then we'll go back up and give each of the dogs their straw, and then walk back. And as we walk back, we'll pick up the dog boots that we took off before, and then we'll start the cooker and start preparing the food. And while the food is, while the water's heating, we'll start doing checking the dogs for their joints and their feet. And then after about 40 minutes, typically 40 minutes, the food will be ready. And we'll then feed the dogs. Once we've fed the dogs, we take away their bowls, and then that's it. We're finished with the dogs for whatever, 3 or 4 hours. And by going through this routine religiously in training, we found that when we get to checkpoints or when we're camping on races, the dogs know exactly what's going to happen. That a dog may curl up, and you think it's actually sleeping, but it knows that in 40 minutes time it's actually going to get fed, and you'll see a dog occasionally open its eye and look at you to make sure that you are still preparing the food, and they won't go into a deep sleep until after they've actually had their meal. So that is the conditioning that they get by doing this repeated this repeated routine in training. So as I said, you should get to, by the time you get to the racing, you should get to a checkpoint, and all your dogs should go down to sleep. It doesn't always be the case. There always has to be one dog that has to be different to everybody else. This was actually, I think this was about 850 miles through the one Yukon Quest, and this dog, he was doing his best not to sleep at all throughout the whole race. So conditioning, that's most of the training that we do. So conditioning, every year we have a race, which is our target race. Normally it's the Yukon Quest, so that we know that we're going to have a 1,000-mile race, which is going to start the first weekend in February. As I said, it's going to be 1,000 miles. We know roughly what we're going to do, how we're going to run each individual leg, how long we're going to camp. And so then we then set up our whole training program for that winter based on that target race. Some good advice that we picked up from boot camp with Anne and Jamie is, kind of 3 weeks before your target race, then go out and run the distance. That's obviously not possible with a 1,000-mile race, but 3 weeks before the Yukon Quest, we'll go to Copper Basin. And Copper Basin is perfect in terms of terrain, in terms of temperature, and the fact that you're running in the dark pretty much. And also the checkpoint distances are pretty similar to what you'll get in the Quest. But say you were training for a 60-mile race, then if your target race is the Can-Am 60 at the start of March, then 3 weeks before that, go out and do a 60-mile run. And then in the interim, in those final 3 weeks, then drop the distances right back. You now know that the dogs can finish that distance, and in those next 3 weeks, you can concentrate on speed and doing shorter distances, and there's much less chance that the dogs are going to pick up injuries. So that's what that means by having that target race and then doing the race distance 3 weeks before. As I said, the early season training is vitally important. So we try and start in July or August. Like I said, this year we were able to start in June. We won't run if it's above 10 degrees Celsius. Temperature has to be below 10 degrees Celsius. And we find now that we're starting to actually reduce that. So we're doing 12-mile runs at the moment, and I won't do a 12-mile run if it's above 7 degrees Celsius. It's just not worth it. We tend to have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be able to do that. We start off doing really short runs, so somewhere between 2 and 2.5 miles. And this is what I said I picked up from Denis Tremblay and Norman Castellon back in 2006, 2007. Is you do these short runs, and then you do 6 runs at that distance, and then double it, and then go and do. And what we do is it's about 2.5. Our loop is about 2.5 miles, and the next run is a 6-mile loop. So we'll go 6 runs at 2.5 miles, then we'll go 6 runs at 6 miles. And what we've done in the past is then go 6 runs at 12 miles, 6 runs at 20 miles. This year, because we've started really early, I've been able to do much slower training, and I want to see how this works in the long term. So we started off doing 6 2-mile runs, then we went to 8 6-mile runs, then 8-mile runs, 10-mile runs. And we're now coming to the end of the 12-mile runs, and I've now got to decide whether we're going to go to 14-mile runs or 16-mile runs. We carry water with us all the time. So, when we start on the 6-mile runs, we'll stop at 3 miles and we'll give them water. And we'll keep carrying water until it's cold enough that we can actually carry food with us to give the dogs snacks. And we train really slowly. And this was a tip that we picked up from Kim and Kelly and from Jay back in 2005. Just train really, really slowly. So we're doing 6 to 8 miles an hour. When you're starting, you're gonna pick up speed slightly, and if there's a creature in the trail, you're gonna pick up speed. But we try and keep the speeds really slow, and we get no injuries at all in early season training. I can't remember the last time we had an early season training injury. We tend to be on sleds and maybe even racing before we pick up our first injuries. September to October, we're going to be increasing time. So we'll be looking at 3 to 4 hour runs. We're still on the ATV. As I said, we'll transition from giving water to giving snacks. So we'll carry a cooler with us with a mix of kibble and meat. And the ground's frozen enough, or there's maybe enough snow on the ground that we can just dump food in front of the dogs. We would try and start snacking the same as we would on a race. So pretty much every hour. October, our goal for October is that by the end of October, all the dogs have 500 miles in training on them. We'll have started doing some of the longer runs, so maybe 30 to 40 mile runs, but we're predominantly still on the ATV. The way things are at the moment, we're lucky if we get on the sleds by November, and with climate change, it's even getting in towards Christmas before we get on the sleds. November, the goal is to have 1,000 miles by the end of November. I normally hit the October and November targets, and the targets after that I very rarely hit. Like I said, hopefully we'll be on sleds. There's a place we can travel from here. It's about 2.5 hours drive. So if we don't have snow here, we can drive there, and we can do 50, 60, 70 mile runs there. And there's places where we can stop and camp as well. Once we're on the sleds, we tend to increase the speed to 8 to 9 miles an hour. And this is obviously for running long distance. We want to keep our speeds consistent. For me, it would be ideal if our starting speed was 7.5 miles an hour and our finishing speed was 7.5 miles an hour. If I can run the whole race at 7.5 miles an hour, that's perfect. We're not, I'm not looking to be running at 12, 13 miles an hour. The dogs just can't do it. I remember seeing, I think it may have been at the trade fair when Lance was down there presenting, and he was talking about this, how people think that he's running his dogs at 12 and 13 miles an hour, and he's absolutely not. He's running his dogs at a consistent slow speed, and that's the way to get dogs to the finish line. As I said, we try and do lots of camping, and we're replicating racing, not just in the fact that we go through the same routine when we get to a camping spot, but we try and run and rest the way we would on a race as well. So maybe a 6-hour run, 4-hour rest, 6-hour run, 5-hour rest. By the end of December, we hope to have 2,000 miles on the dogs. I don't think I've ever achieved that target, but we are starting to do some longer runs, some 60-mile runs. And again, we'll look at the quest, and we'll look at what sort of distances we want to run before we camp. So, the most we would probably run between camping spots would be 60 miles on the quest. So we will do some 50 and 60 mile runs, but we'll also do some shorter runs as well to keep the motivation up and keep the speed up as well. And then by the end of January, it's good to have 3,000 miles. I think 3,000 miles is a good target to get to start a 1,000-mile race. Again, I don't think we've ever achieved that. I think the best we've had before the quest has been 2,500. Obviously, with doing back-to-back quest and Iditarods, we have got 3,500 miles on the dogs before Iditarod, but we've never achieved 3,000 miles before the quest. Minimum for running the quest is probably 1,500 miles. 1,800 miles is okay, So I think the lowest we've had is 1,500, and it's not ideal, but it's enough to get the dogs to the finish line. And then we'll do, as I said, we'll do racing in January as well, just to get the dogs prepared for the quest. And the one that we do most is Copper Basin. As I said before, it's very similar terrain, very similar temperature, and very similar distances. And again, it exposes the dogs to any viruses, but it also, we pretty much camp in isolation. So by going to Copper Basin, you've got dog teams. There's so many, tends to be 40 to 50 teams enter. You come into the first checkpoint, and there's mandatory rest you have to take in the checkpoints. So you've got another dog team camping 3 feet either side of you. So it gives the dogs good exposure to being in checkpoints with other dogs, so they get used to the noise and they get used to the hullabaloo that's going on. And then hopefully, with all that, then you achieve your target race with a dog team, which is certainly capable of starting, and with any luck, capable of actually finishing the race itself. One question I often get asked is how do I prepare? I'm not just saying this. I am undoubtedly the weakest member of the team. I am not the athletes. The athletes are definitely the dogs. I'm the fat guy who stands on the back and pedals every now and again. But how do I prepare? It's difficult to maintain a work-home balance. I work full time. I'm lucky that now I work from home, so I can go out and I can train in the morning and have the dogs finish training and have the dogs fed by 8 o'clock, and I can start work at 8 o'clock. When we have cold enough temperatures in the evening, I can finish work at 5 o'clock, walk straight out into the dog yard, snack the dogs, put harnesses on, and off we go. A typical day for me in the summer is, getting up at 6 o'clock, feed the dogs, go to work. In the evening, you know, 8 o'clock at night, feed the dogs, go to bed. Once late summer, early fall, that's when we're starting getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We'll train the dogs, then feed them, then work, and then, you know, later in the fall, that's when we'll stop the 4 o'clock starts, but we'll be training in the evening. And typically in the fall and the winter, you know, we're doing 5, 6, 7 hour runs. So if I finish work at 5, start training at 6, you know, I'm not going to be getting to bed until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So we're all, you know, I'm already starting to get practice for sleep deprivation in October, November, and December. You know, I'm getting 4 to 5 hours sleep a day in those months. I find that I think probably partly as a result of that, but also I think as a result of the, you know, the fact that we see very little sunlight here in the winter. I find December and January particularly difficult. I get really depressed. And I get demotivated, and that's probably the absolute worst time to get demotivated. That's when you want to be, you know, going out doing those longer training runs and keeping the dogs ticking along. So I do find December and January pretty challenging. I try to work on my fitness, you know, do some weights, a rowing machine, some cycling, and believe it or not, I also try and eat healthily. I've certainly put on more weight this year than I normally would. But yeah, I do try and keep my weight down. You know, I'm 6'1", 205 pounds, I think. So, you know, a pretty big guy, and quite often competing with a lot smaller people as well. And so the lighter I can get, and the easier it is for the dogs. I've also found that actually cutting out alcohol is a big help as well. In the last 2 or 3 years, just stopped drinking completely. I'll stop drinking in August, September, and I won't drink again until after the quest. And I found that's really helped me with motivation, and also keeping my weight down. And it's also it's way easier to get up early in the morning and train if you're not drinking alcohol the night before. Stress is a big thing. You know, I said that we've done the back-to-back 1,000-mile races in 15, 16, and 18. I'll say publicly, I'll never do that again. It's a huge amount of stress. I really realized that during the 2018 Iditarod, and it puts stress on me. It puts stress on the family, and that stress then goes to the dogs as well. So it's not good for the dogs. So, you know, we try and maintain as much of a positive attitude around the dogs as we possibly can. And those people who know me know that's kind of difficult for me to maintain a positive attitude. And I'm sure Natalie and Jay have discovered this week that I don't always have a positive attitude as well. But we do try and stay as positive as we can around, because that, you know, the dogs definitely pick up on that attitude. And so really that's it. As I said, I apologize. There were a whole bunch of other videos that were in the presentation. Maybe if I am able to eventually upload the recorded presentation, then you'll be able to see those videos as well. But I think that's probably a good time for me to stop talking. I really hope this was beneficial. It's always really difficult to know what to talk about. I remember when we used to come to the trade fair a lot. And I said, you know, we saw Lance speaking there, and Karen and Blake and Hugh and Mike, and a lot of the people would come and talk about the quest and the Iditarod. And I remember, I think it was Lucille Murphy saying one year that she wishes people would come and talk about something other than just racing. So hopefully this was beneficial. And as I said, everything I've talked about is true. There's absolutely no secrets whatsoever. I'll tell you, you know, we keep daily spreadsheets of exactly how we run. And anybody is welcome to have those spreadsheets. There's absolutely no secrets whatsoever, and it's up to you what you do with this information. So I will stop sharing my screen there, and then if there are any questions, we can go from there. I'm going to pass it over to you, Viktor, I think, if you're still with us.
Yes, we have 4 questions right now. First one is, what is the factor to the 3 months in dog food? Is it the macronutrients and the vitamins?
I'd have to get you to speak to Robert Downey. I don't know. I think it's just that it takes the way he described it. It just takes a dog 3 months to adapt to a new dog food. You know, maybe it is the micronutrients, but I'm really not sure. I'm not a nutritionist in any way, shape, or form. But you know, I certainly, I mean, he is an expert in his field, without a shadow of a doubt. So he would be the better person to speak to.
Okay, the second one, what about black labs?
I did see that New Brunswick Urban Mushing had joined. So how are you doing, Doug? I wouldn't have black labs in my team, but there's nothing wrong with them whatsoever. You know, I mean, you do a phenomenal job. I love following your posts on Facebook. So you know, you do a phenomenal job. I've been told that one of my dogs was a Dalmatian or a Border Collie at one time, but I'm yet to be told that one of them looks like yet to be told that one of them looks like a black lab. But yeah, I do follow your posts on Facebook, and you do a phenomenal job with those guys. And I don't envy you living in New Brunswick either. So we lived there for 2.5 years, and I wouldn't move back there. But I know you get good temperatures and good snow.
Okay, third one. How much of the green lid mussel do you put in the 5-gallon bucket?
It is. Last year I was putting in about half a teaspoon, but I've decided to hang the expense, and I'm putting in a heaped teaspoon in every bucket. And I do that once a day. I don't supplement every meal. I supplement once a day, not every meal. And when we're racing, I'll make up little sandwich bags of supplements. And again, it would be every 2 meals that we would give those supplements to when we're racing.
Thank you. And Jay was, we were surprised. She asked that, what? You give up your gin?
Mostly, yeah. I've got an extensive collection of about I think 26 full bottles at the moment. So one day I'm going to give up the abstinence. It's going to be a hell of a party. I'm not sure I'll come out the other side of it, but I certainly haven't given it up full time. So.
And someone wrote that, lol, Jay, great presentation. I think great presentation is for you. Till now, that's all the questions.
Okay.
Maybe someone,
I guess we've been...
any question? Yes.
Do they think, yeah, I don't see why your dogs, as long as you train properly, I don't see why your dogs would not be capable of doing a 30-mile run. So that was a question. I'm reading some of the chats. That was a question from Doug. Yeah, I don't see why they shouldn't. The problem you would have with labs is their coat. You know, I certainly wouldn't recommend racing in the north with them. You know, but I mean, you see dogs here with really light coats as well. So yeah, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to do a 30-mile run at all. And jumping above Jay's question about, Jay asked, what about the Dr. Carson's probiotics? How much a day do you wind up putting in the bucket? I thought I had some here. This is actually their human probiotic. They sent me some of this, and I never actually used it. I'll stick to gin as a supplement. But this is the size of packet, and one of these. I'd have to go back and look at how much he recommends. I think normally, just normal training during the week, you put one of these per bucket every 4 times a week, and then the week before the quest or the Iditarod, then you give one of these packets in the bucket every day, and then when you're racing, you put 1 packet in every meal. One of the important things about the probiotics is you put it in just as you're about to feed. If you mix it in with the food when you first start, when you mix up the food and you let it, you let everything settle for that 12 hours where I said the kibble's soaking. If you put the probiotics in with the food, it'll actually start interacting with the food itself. And what you want is that in the gut, and you want it interacting with the food in the gut. But if you put it in the bucket, then it'll start interacting with the food in the bucket, and that's not it's not harmful, but you're not going to get the full benefit from the food from the food itself. So you mix the probiotic right at the very last moment, just before you're going out to feed. So Priscilla asked, what type of exercise do you do for your retired dogs, distance daily? It varies. We try and, all the retired dogs live in pens. They all have pretty big pens. So they run around in the pens. And then Louise will take it in turns to take them walking. If we have puppies, we'll use some of the retired dogs for doing puppy runs. But when we have the opportunity, we'll do mostly short runs, probably 3 to 5 miles. So again, it's going to depend on we've had some dogs that have retired at 5 years old because they just don't have it, and they're going to stay with us for life. We've had other dogs which have retired at 11 years old, and so that we have 10, 11 year old dogs which are training with the main team as well. And what we find with it's not their mind that goes in the end; it's their bodies. Their bodies just can't keep up with the younger dogs. I mean, we talked about Hector. I could tell a story about Hector. A phenomenal lead dog. I was so happy when he finished the 2013 Yukon Quest. He kept training with the dogs. I wanted him to. I so wanted him to finish the Iditarod. I can't remember whether it was the 15 or the 16 Iditarod. But it was probably the 15 Iditarod. I so wanted him to finish the. In fact, yeah, it must have been because he was 9 years old. And so he started really well. As we got into the race, he was moving. I was using him in lead less and less. He was having trouble with the endurance. And then we got into Ellen checkpoint, which is about 840 miles into the race, and he ended up he was running next to one of the other dogs, and the other dog was pretty dominant. And one of the dogs actually started to pick on him. I could see he was getting really upset about this, and I still wanted to keep him running. And we got to White Mountain, which is the final checkpoint, and you have an 8-hour layover in White Mountain, and it's now 80 miles from the finish. I thought fantastic, 80 more miles, and Hector's going to finish the Iditarod. And he looked so miserable. He was having so much difficulty, I think, keeping up with the younger dogs. He just no longer had that endurance. And I got the vets to check him out. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. They said he was fine to finish. I went off and I slept, and I came back and he still looked so miserable. And 10 minutes before my 8 hours was up and I was due to leave, I suddenly realized that he didn't care about finishing the Iditarod. It was only me who cared about him finishing the Iditarod. So I dropped him, even though he only had 80 more miles to go. He was at that point where he was struggling to keep up with the younger dogs. And that's what we find with all the retired dogs, that they don't have that endurance they want to run, they want to keep up with the younger dogs, but they just don't have it. So we'll drop their distances, and a lot of the time it's towards the end of it's towards the end of the season that we'll be taking them out on much more recreational runs as well. I think that's the last of the questions, I think. I can't see any other questions there. Yes, Victor, was there anything else?
But tell everybody that Hector was under the bird arch.
He's an amazing dog. He really is. Even now he like. I'm going to be in trouble after this. That Hector and Poppy, the 15-year-old and the 17-and-a-half-year-old, they spend their entire days inside. And because I was giving this presentation, they've been in we have a pen on the deck right outside the back door, and they're normally in there for feeding and to go to the toilet. So they spend about 10 minutes in this pen every day. So they've been in there about 2 hours now. So they are going to be pretty pissed off with me when I go and bring them in. And Hector will charge around. He's absolutely crazy. Like he will just run around the deck, then he'll come in and he'll run around the kitchen, bumping into everything else, and then he'll air his displeasure with me that he's been outside for so long. But it's so great to see him, as a 15-year-old, just running around in the kitchen. It's warms your heart, I guess. So. see people are dropping off. So I guess if there's no other questions, again, huge thanks to Jay and Natalie for inviting me to speak. I really wish we could have done this in person. You know, I would love to have come back to the trade fair and, you know, and as I said, done this as an in-person presentation. And big thanks to Viktor again for giving up his Zoom account at very short notice, and he had other plans, I think. So I'm pleased he stayed to officiate as well. And thanks to all of you for listening. I really hope it was beneficial. I can talk forever about sled dogs, and I frequently do. So thanks ever so much for your time. I guess this is a good place to leave it. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. So thanks everybody, and
thanks very much, Rob. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.